Okay, welcome everybody to the Presidential Roundtable brought to you by the Ubyssey. My name is Brian Platt. I'm the features editor for the newspaper, and I will be moderating this roundtable. And we're going to start off by having the three candidates just give us a quick 10-second introduction to their background and who they are. Ben, do you want to start?
Yeah. My name is Ben Capellacci. I'm running to be president. I was VP academic of the AMS 2 years ago and the director of Safe Walk the year before that. I was also the student senator for commerce.
Hello everyone, my name is Matt Parson. I'm the current VP academic, and the year prior I was the Interfraternity Council president.
Hi, my name's Elisa. Most people call me AJ. I have done many things, such as working in residence life. I co-chaired the Student Leadership Conference that happened just last week. I've also been on the Senate and ran AMS first week, as well as the referendum last year.
Great. So I want to start off with Matt and Ben. Both of you have sat on AMS Council before, and can you just give a quick sense of what you think the most important thing is that the president of the AMS does? Who wants to start?
Sure.
Matt, go for it.
Well, if I had to narrow it down to one thing, he's really, or he or she should be the champion of all things within the AMS. It's really tough just because the AMS itself is such a large organization that dabbles in so many different things, and it's having an appreciation of everything that's going on and liaising with everyone, be it the executive or the student council, and being that driver of change.
I really think it's about managing relationships. You're looking at relationships with the university, relationships amongst the executive, relationships with the council, and more importantly, relationships with students at Ubyssey. Making sure that the interests of students, be it their academics, be it their lobbying interests, all those things are being represented by keeping strong relationships. And
AJ, I wanted to ask you, on your website you've written a bit of an essay talking about why somebody who hasn't been on AMS council before, had a council position, you've done other things for the AMS, but why you would want to run for president. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you said is, I'm running because it's frustrating to see the same sorts of candidates run and win every year, leaders who in turn do not make substantial change. So can you tell us a little bit about why you think it's valuable to come from the outside? And I'd also like to hear whether you think Matt and Ben are the sort of candidates who do run every year.
Mm-hmm. I guess I wrote that mostly because the question I get asked whenever I do tell someone I'm running is, but you haven't been on AMS Council. And I don't think that being on AMS Council is in any way detrimental. Like, obviously it provides great experience, but it's not the only way to get that same experience. And so I think that what's really valuable is the development skills that you have no matter where you get them. So leadership training and giving feedback, training and running a team and managing a team, those are the things that's important no matter where they're coming from. And so it's sometimes frustrating when you get people from a council background that are like, but I've been on council, I know what I'm doing, that don't necessarily have the training. I've worked with both Matt and Ben, and I think that we're all exceptional candidates this year. So, I mean, they have other leadership background as well. I'm not trying to be detrimental to their backgrounds in any way, but if you want someone to bring new ideas to the AMS, maybe choose someone that hasn't been on council and comes from that different background and can bring different things.
And is there something specific that you, when you say substantial change, is there something specific that you have in mind that you want to bring in as coming from relatively from the outside?
I really think it is that student engagement piece that perhaps you get caught up in the things that you do and you don't understand why students aren't appreciating them. Like, I feel like it's true on the projects I've worked on. And so bringing in that student engagement piece and really connecting with the people that are connected on other places on campus, that should be the target audience first, is why aren't they engaging in the AMS? Why aren't they reaching out when they need support on their programming? So,
Matt, I know one of the things that you've said when you've talked previously is that one of your pledge to address what AJ just said is to try to get out and talk to students. Mm-hmm. Is it you want to spend 30 minutes a day trying to talk to students? Are you still sticking to that, or is that have you?
Yeah, completely. I mean, there's no real time limit to it. It's a simple number just because I think that goals should be measurable, and I have been around the AMS for the past year, and I do appreciate that the role of the presidency is a hefty one and with a lot of responsibilities that take up your day. So I thought, 4 students a day was completely manageable, and the pledge, for people who may not have read it or really understand it, it's a different approach, just because it's the proverbial elephant in the room: student apathy, student engagement, lack of communication, and every presidential candidate brings it up because it is a real systemic issue that the AMS has. But whenever the solutions are brought up, it's always a top-down approach of, oh, I know, I'm going to, have them like this page or follow this stream, sort of the paradigm social media shift that no one else has ever thought of, which just doesn't work. I mean, time after time again, they've shown that sometimes students don't really want to be engaged in that way. So I'm not trying to, really suggest that walking around for however long it takes to meet those quote-unquote apathetic students is going to really have a large difference. But I think sort of having the person who is responsible for driving change within the AMS has an appreciation for your more average student at Ubyssey would be quite significant.
So, and you've tried to back this up by saying that if you weren't meeting this pledge, if somebody saw that you weren't getting out there talking to students and meeting the numbers you said you're going to meet, that you're actually going to forfeit salary. Ben, I want to know from you, do you think that this is a realistic and practical way to achieve the goal of student engagement, or would you do Matt's pledge, or would you come at it a different way?
Well, I think both Matt and Alyssa have actually said some really important things about student engagement. Alyssa has worked with a lot of students across all campus, and that's really important because it shows the diversity in background. And with Matt, going out and meeting students at random is another great way to just talk to the average student. When I was UP academic, a lot of work I did was around the land use plan, and part of my outreach to that was to go to speak to student groups. So I went to as many student groups as would accept me to talk to them. And a lot of these students aren't necessarily connected with the AMS, but they are concerned about their campus and are concerned about student culture. I think that as a president and as an organization, the AMS needs to be actively outreaching to students in everything that it does, through the organizations that it supports and it works with, but then also through sort of one-off encounters and events. I think Matt's idea really does promote a lot of that engagement, but I think that the principle of that engagement is something that needs to be considered by the entire organization, not necessarily just the president.
Okay, I want to move on to talking about cost of education now, and we can start off by talking about something that Matt wrote specifically in his platform, which is talking about Policy 72, which I don't think a lot of students know that UBC has the UBC Board of Governors has a policy that says no student shall have the cost of education be prohibitive to them completing their studies. And Matt, you've said that policy needs to be revisited and revised. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that, and then we'll hear the other candidates talk about this as well.
Sure. Well, you stated the policy already. It's quite generally the university's promise to its student body that no one shall not be able to complete their studies because of financial means. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying that promise isn't really being upkept right now. A lot of students are falling through the cracks because there's different stipulations saying that, well, you had to have exhausted all other resources, student financial aid being one of those. And it's, again, almost common knowledge that a lot of students are exempt from that because of whatever reasons, your parents' financial standing or what have you. And in those instances, UBC basically says, all right, well, you haven't exhausted all other financial resources. In addition to that, the way that it interplays with the few or the students that are on student financial aid is quite prohibitive because even if UBC is able to give them X dollars, be it, let's say, $5,000 on top of everything that the province is already transferring, there's somewhat of a clawback effect because the province then looks at that money as an added resource that the student's receiving and then will receive $5,000 less in the next cycle. So they're almost back to square one where when it comes to end of month and they're trying to buy food or pay for their rent, they're really capped and it's difficult because,
But is there like a specific way that you would reword when you say revisit and revise, what specifically do you mean?
Well, the exciting thing is that the university, I feel, does have quite an appetite to revise this. So I mentioned earlier that if the university is to just go out and provide grants or bursaries to students, you're going to have a difficulty because the students aren't able to have that immediate effect. It's going to help them in the sense that at the time of graduation, they're going to have lesser debt, but when it comes to the end of the month and they're trying to have enough funds to pay for groceries, they're not able to. So when I say I think this policy needs to be reformed, what I say is there needs to be an investigation in more creative ways that they're able to provide finances that might not be so obviously clawed back from the province. So maybe a form of subsidized housing that isn't necessarily just a check, but it would come at $560, and students who are on student financial aid are able to pay for it, so on and so forth.
AJ, is there anything you hear in there that you disagree with?
Well, nothing I disagree with. I think that the AMS should definitely, I don't know if it's a change in the policy that's necessary. The policy itself, the wording of it sounds appropriate, but it's how they're following through on it. So ensuring that we're lobbying the university to give its best effort and know that the current policies aren't within the larger frame of the policy aren't working. But I think what the AMS can do better is lobbying about all of the other things that aren't tuition. Like tuition, yes, it's expensive, and every year do students want lower tuition? Yes, of course. But how can we make change right now? How can we help with the issue of food? How can we make the AMS food bank better? How can we provide resources for housing? How do we fix the things that we have direct access to?
And if I can expand a bit on that, one of the biggest issues with a lot of this funding for students right now, especially considering financial aid, actually has to do with the province, and that the province of British Columbia, has certain limitations on the kind of financial aid you're able to receive, paying interest on that financial aid, how it's dispersed, and of course funding the university that in itself. So when we look at the AMS's role in this, I think the AMS has a really strong role to play in strengthening student influence at the level of the province so that UBC is better supported so that it can better support students, and that students are better supported by the province so that their shortfalls are being accounted for. I think Policy 72 really is the result of a few shortfalls from the province's side, and maybe some of the reactions that the university's had as a result of that.
Okay, I want to go through two questions that are sort of quicker yes/no things. Right now, the AMS has a policy of being okay with tuition increases as long as they stick to the rate of inflation, nothing higher than the rate of inflation. Would any of you change that policy, or would you keep that policy with the AMS? Would you ask to keep it? Yeah.
Well, I'll take a stance on that just because I did have a part in the development of that policy. The difficulty of writing policy within the AMS is that it is your responsibility to represent all 47,000 students of UBC, and different students hold different thoughts on how much tuition should be. What our policy states is that we oppose any increase in tuition greater than inflation, and we support any reduction in tuition where if we can find funding sources other than student sources.
Yeah, so you're in line with you agree with that? I
agree that tuition should, if there is an ability to reduce tuition without a result in a lesser academic experience, then we should be able to provide that.
Okay, and both of you are in accord with that policy as well, the current policy of the AMS on tuition. The other thing I want to quickly ask is, before there has been talk about UBC helping to form a provincial lobby group to focus on the provincial level. Would any of you try to revive that?
Of course, yeah. The AMS has had a long leadership role in the province in terms of the fact that it's the largest school here in British Columbia, but also the fact that the AMS has usually had a very strong voice in a lot of organizations. Mm-hmm. Looking at Jeremy's plans last year to create a provincial lobbying group, I think that's definitely one of the priorities of the AMS going forward.
But what held that back?
What held that back? There was a lot of issues with actually the other schools. Many of the other schools weren't in a position where they were able to join us, particularly around their affiliations with the Canadian Federation of Students and a couple of other things. So I think the time is right now for the AMS to really act as a leader here and move forward to unite students from across the province to focus on these things that matter.
And both of you would also try to do this? Or?
One approach that I take that might differ from Ben is that something that he stated is the fact that there was almost just an open call of let's get every single post-secondary institution on board and we'll create the provincial lobbying group. And I think in principle that's fantastic, and I hope to strive for something that's quite similar to that. But I think in the early days stages, what should be done is more of a let's assemble all of the research institutions, so UVic, SFU, UBC as a starting point, and then and from there, once you have the big three all on the same table, all advocating on point, you would be able to reach out to the smaller institutions. So you're not having to deal with so many different universities, scheduling, etc.
I was going to say something very similar to Matt. See who's on board right now, but you can lobby effectively as one institution as well. Maybe not quite as effectively, but don't waste all of your time trying to put together a group. Also focus on the needs of your school and balance your time.
And can I respond to that? Yeah, I think that incorporating all universities at one time is a very infeasible goal. However, there are universities that I'm aware of that have expressed interest in creating anything like this. There are actually 4 research institutions here in British Columbia, UNBC being the other one, that have expressed interest in some sort of a coordinated effort. Maybe not necessarily a formal group, but activities that show that we are in collaboration.
Okay, let's talk about governance at UBC. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000 market residents who live on campus now, and UBC is not a municipality, doesn't have anything that can realistically be called a city council. Can I hear from you what you think the AMS's role is in pushing for, I assume that everybody thinks that something needs to be done about governance. So what is the AMS's role in advocacy around that? AJ, do you want to start?
Sure. I think that students are in a really quite unique position on campus because we're not permanent residents. We often don't live there long term. And so we need to make sure that we're there from the start of those governance discussions, saying that there needs to be a voice for students. And then so by the time they figure everything out and they're starting to actually put together a model for governance, the student voice has been there that whole time, so they include us naturally. And if that doesn't happen, that we're not included naturally, we can say, okay, we've been there this whole time pushing for changes in governance. You need to include us, and we're that much stronger.
Is there a certain model that you'd want to push towards?
I don't know. It's such a unique place. I think, and it's so hard with the students not being permanent residents, or a few of them being permanent residents. You don't want to discount the people in residence because they aren't paying in the same way that students not in residence that can afford to live on campus are. I don't know what that model looks like. Ideally, some sort of students with a vote, at least 2 of them on whatever this model looks like proportionally. I would say at least 20% a student voice is at least fair because 50% of campus residents are students.
Okay, Ben, do you want to go off that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of uncertainty about what's happening with the governance model going forward. We know that something needs to be done. We just don't know when that's going to happen and how it's going to happen, and that's what really leaves the AMS in a strange position. I think coordinating our efforts as a student society and as students is really important. Making sure that our relationships with the province, with the UNA, with the university are strong to start with. So like Alyssa said, so that we can justify our position as it stands, but then also listening to students and saying, well, what kind of representation would you want? What is important to you on this campus? And making sure that the AMS's position, when it is developed, is the result of a lot of strength from not only the student voice, but because of strong relationships that we have.
And do you have any sort of concrete idea for what a governance model might look like that you'd want to push towards?
I don't think that the AMS is in a position to really say anything about the governance model right now, but I think that the idea should be, and I think the AMS needs to focus on making sure that that it's not necessarily just a student voice, but an actual student influence, so that instead of just listening, they actually act upon what we think as students, and that's what's really important.
Matt?
I mean, a lot of the points that I was going to mention already brought up. I guess one thing that I would differ from my other 2 candidates is that I actually feel that the conversation on governance has already started. I think that, I know that this is right now an interim solution. The UBC needs to provide an alternate form of governance, and to think that they've just been putting this off is foolish. So what needs to happen is really a strong advocacy front, and that's coalescing all residents, all students, and then once that critical mass is reached, it's bringing faculty and staff. So we can go to the province, say, listen, the people who are going to be governed by this eventual model currently are not being consulted and need to be so. I think in sort of bringing those groups together to investigate different governance models would be impossible, to put it in short. But what could be done is to look at what are some principles that we actually do agree on. So I think a lot of people would say that UBC should hold a lot more authority over what happens on academic lands, for example. I think that might be something that most groups could agree on, and it could go from representation. How do we want to determine that, and work through sort of the building blocks of what would make a governance model, and from there reach the common ground, and then go through our advocacy work.
Okay. Before we move on, any disagreements?
Just one point, actually, that the decision on governance comes from the province, and when they decide to do this is when they're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
The university really has no influence in that decision, and when they do it, that's when we have to change.
Well, UBC needs to make the proposal to the province, though.
Okay.
I was going to say that one thing the AMS also needs to make sure it's doing, other than acting by itself, is making sure that our student representatives on the Board of Governors are being liaised with actively, because they're going to have a lot more say, often in a different group of people. Like, we can liaise with some of the group, but they also have a very active role, so making sure we're on the same place fighting for students the same way.
Okay. I want to go on to the AMS's role as providing social life for students on campus. And Ben, you have a paragraph set apart in your platform about the war on fun. So what I want to know is, what do you think, number one, what do you think your mandate is, the AMS's mandate is from students to hold social events? And number two, when the AMS holds a large event like Block Party, lately the rule has been that Block Party has to be done as a break-even event, and the talent budget has gone way down. Is that something you would stick with? Do you think large events need to be held break-even? Start with Ben.
Okay. Well, strengthening student culture is a really important thing, I think. The AMS has a big role to play, not only in creating cultural events for students, but then also working at inspiring events across the campus. So when I talk about the war on fun, it's largely to do with student activities, not necessarily ones that are promoted by the AMS. But what the AMS does do is it has the capacity to hold these larger events, like Block Party. I think that Block Party is an event that the AMS needs to hold, in the sense that it really brings a lot of students together at the beginning and the end of the year, respectively for the first week as well. But in terms of that being break-even or not, I think it's a question of what student interests are. The AMS Council is a place where these decisions are decided, and if students feel strongly enough about having an event with major talent and major activity, then they have the power to do that.
How would you gauge that? How would you know if students feel strongly enough?
Well, the council decides that, and that's why we represent and elect representatives on council to make these decisions.
Okay, so you would go with council's decision. Okay, Matt, do you want to go into that?
Yeah, just to the point of budgetary decisions, sort of setting the course of Block Party. I don't think it's really as binary as it's either going to be a break-even sort of event or it's going to lose money. I don't suggest that I came up with this idea. It's something that we're looking into right now as an executive, which is reaching out to undergraduate constituents and saying, listen, if we are all to partner together, we would be able to throw a much better Block Party. And through your spheres of influence, you're going to have a higher attendance. You're able to reciprocate more shared advertisement, and it's completely mutually beneficial to everyone. So it's I guess thinking more outside of the box. What are some other partnerships that we can search out that would be able to increase the talent budget so we can get those bigger name DJs or shows, what have you, that are going to ignite Block Party into relevance again?
Yeah, AJ?
I guess I have some slightly different ideas. Running first week, if you separate the first week events from the events budget, first week managed to break even and the events lost us a lot of money. That's not even looking at the Welcome Back barbecue. That's just the concerts that took place during the week, and it's because students either didn't know about it or didn't want to come out. So I think a little bit of the war on fun is we're not communicating that the fun is out there well enough to students. Another point on Welcome Back barbecue, and I'm hoping that the new events manager can work on this, is that there are lots of opportunities to partner not just with constituencies, but with companies that want to come in and be involved, especially when it is an alcoholic event, there is beer. We can partner with those companies and thus reduce the cost of the event. Also, I think a lot of people don't come for the talent, and if it is a DJ that's a little bit cheaper than a full band to fly out, it's been just as fun the last couple of years. And on that note, it's always been no cost Welcome Back barbecue, and if students are demanding higher talent, then I think that they'd also be willing to pay $5 entry fee, something that's manageable for most students. There could be giveaways for those that couldn't come. There's ways to manage it and still have those big events, and then I think we need to really communicate that they're happening so we get people out.
Any disagreements or?
I just like to add to one point that AJ brought up, which I'd like to kind of pull out and expand on, which is how we communicate actual events is so frustrating. I mean, we've really operated an events department as one person coordinating and putting these events on with little to no regard to the actual promotions of it. And I think one real thing that would be easy to bring in and implement would be sort of a promotions team. Like if we look back at the most successful events that were ever held on this campus, it's Arts County Fair. And why is that? It's the fact that we had people, climbing up trees, screaming at students, saying, "Hey, take notice of the ACF." It's going to classrooms and making announcements, and putting up posters just does not cut it. So the events, need to sort of shift into really taking consideration the promotion side of things.
ACF also had the biggest bands in the country at the time coming to it, which is something that doesn't happen at UBC anymore. For the last question, what I want to ask or what I want you guys to do is, I think right now there's a lot of similarities between a lot of the things that all of you are saying. So give us in a short burst, tell us what makes you why a vote for you is different from a vote from the other two. You've got about 30 seconds each to do this. Do you want to start, Ben?
Okay, well, let's put me on guard here. Well, I think both Alyssa and Matt have demonstrated that they've been involved in promoting the campus life here, and I think that's a really important thing to say. I think what's really important is really for UBC to consider what direction it wants its student society to go in, where the vision for its society is, and how much that vision aligns with them. Looking at things like strengthening student influence, cultivating academic achievement, and really inspiring student culture. Those are the kinds of values that I think the AMS should be looking for and the kind of values that students want.
Okay, Matt.
I'm not going to go just into my platform because I think a lot of my candidates share that. If I had to pick a few things that sort of separate me from the two, it's the fact that I am a current AMS executive, and we have been going through a completely transformative time this past year. From our reorg to our strategic plan, we just created an AMS endowment, and I do bring a sense of continuity that is completely lacking from the AMS. We have this time lag that presidents have when they come in and balls are dropped, and I wouldn't have that. Also, I really want to come into the position and reconnect with students in a meaningful way.
I guess I will go with some pretty different similarities, pretty obvious at the table. I think it's been a long time since we've had a woman in that office, which I do think is a little bit important, that women do tend to run things differently. And I'm going to give you a breakdown of my skills in my 30 seconds. I know how to manage and facilitate a high-functioning team and build an executive that can work together to achieve their goals. So it's not people working individually to get things done. It's a team that works together, and then they bring the council into that, and you get something really strong and unified. I'm hardworking, I'm dedicated, and I'm passionate about what this society could be.
Great. Well, thank you to the candidates for participating in the roundtable, and thanks to everybody who's going to be watching this online, and come to ubc.ca for full elections coverage throughout the rest of the election.
Should we do the awkward hello?
The awkward wave.
All right.